All right, so we are going to be doing a lesson today on conditional statements, if-then statements. And so I kind of intimated to this last week. But I thought this would be a good introduction. If you give a mouse a cookie, every single sentence in this text, in this children's book, for the most part, are if-then statements. If this and that. And your proofs that you're going to end up doing in this course all deal with laying down the foundation. If this occurs, then this occurs. Then if this occurs, then this occurs. And so watch how they lay out what happens when you give a mouse a cookie.
If You Give a Mouse a Cookie by Laura Joffe Numeroff. Illustrated by Felicia Bond. If you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to ask for a glass of milk. When you give him the milk, he'll probably ask you for a straw. When he's finished, he'll ask for a napkin. Then he'll want to look in a mirror to make sure he doesn't have a milk mustache. When he looks into the mirror, he might notice his hair needs a trim. So he'll probably ask for a pair of nail scissors. When he's finished giving himself a trim, he'll want a broom to sweep up. He'll start sweeping. He might get carried away and sweep every room in the house. He may even end up washing the floors as well. When he's done, he'll probably want to take a nap. You'll have to fix up a little box for him with a blanket and a pillow. He'll crawl in, make himself comfortable, and fluff the pillow a few times. He'll probably ask you to read him a story. So you'll read to him from one of your books, and he'll ask to see the pictures. When he looks at the pictures, he'll get so excited he'll want to draw one of his own. He'll ask for paper and crayons. He'll draw a picture. When the picture is finished, he'll want to sign his name with a pen. Then he'll want to hang his picture on your refrigerator, which means he'll need Scotch tape. He'll hang up his drawing and stand back to look at it. Looking at the refrigerator will remind him that he's thirsty. So He'll ask for a glass of milk. And chances are, if he asks for a glass of milk, he's going to want a cookie to go with it. Thanks for reading with me. This has been another storybook read-along.
Oh, let's get my light back up. Oh, and there we go. Okay, so that was your introduction. You are going to be writing if-then statements today in 2-2. So let's get to it. So the review isn't really a review because it kind of did talk about conclusions, but not to what I would like you to. So what you're going to do in any if-then statement, you're going to have to pay attention to what they want you to do. You're going to do a lot of writing in today's homework. So Ian and Chris, there's one for you. Okay. So pay attention to whether they want you to underline or circle or whatever the hypothesis in the statement. So your if part of the sentence is your hypothesis, and the then part is your conclusion. The if and the then do not belong to the hypothesis or the conclusion. So you do not circle the word if, you do not or underline, you do not circle or underline the word then. They are not part of it. Sometimes a sentence may or may not have the words if and then in there. So I'll teach you how to determine the hypothesis and the conclusion then. We'll have some examples in a minute. So on this one, I want you to single underline the hypothesis and double underline the conclusion. So both of these are in the if-then form. This one's missing a then, but go ahead and single underline the hypothesis, double underline the conclusion. Bless you. All right, so for number one, if the weather is nice, notice that if is not underlined. We will go swimming. This one doesn't have a then, but I could have easily put in then we will go swimming. This one, again, if it's not underlined, I ride my bike to softball practice, then is not underlined, I will go there on time. You have a new word, which is your Converse. So there's actually 4 different types of statements that we're going to work with today. The Converse is one of them. And you really don't need to memorize their definition of the Converse. But the Converse just means that the if and the then statement have been switched around. The if and the then are going to stay there, but the parts that we have single and double underlined up here are going to switch around. So the converse of this one would be, if we went swimming, then the weather is nice. So the converse of number 1 would be, if we go swimming, then the weather is nice. And so the hypothesis is we go swimming. The conclusion is the weather is nice. The converse may not be true. The conditional statement you have to accept as true, but the converse may or may not end up being true. And today will be a perfect example using rain today. So we'll do a sentence using rain at the very end. So write the converse of number 2. You write the converse of number 2. Flip your if and then statements. So you notice that you might have to switch around your grammar. So on this one, if I get there on time, then I rode my bike to softball practice. You wouldn't leave it as I ride my bike to softball practice. Is this necessarily true? If I get there on time, then I rode my bike to softball practice. Is there another way you could have gotten to practice on time? Yeah, somebody could have driven you. Okay. What about the first converse? If we go swimming and the weather is nice, do you always go swimming when the weather is nice? Possible, it's stupid, but it's possible that you could go swimming when it's raining and lightning and thunder outside. Would that be smart? Nope. Nope.
That sounds so fun.
Yeah, sounds so fun. Notice it's the boys saying that. I'm just pointing that out. All right, so then here, let's write the converse of the original statement. If I study, then I pass the geometry test. Yay. So if, what? If I pass the geometry test, then I study. That sounds kind of funny. I would have fixed, then I studied. I would have personally changed it to then I studied. But they're trying to keep it exact. Don't. In fact, let's go ahead and put this to study. I don't like that at all. It's not very good grammar. So the original statement, well, okay, is that true? Dominic, is that true? I passed the geometry test, then I studied. Could you have passed a geometry test and not studied? Absolutely. But for most people, is that true? No? Those who pass the geometry test, wouldn't most of them have done some sort of studying? Most of them. All right, statement number 4. If I am happy, then I laugh. So write the converse. If, what? If I laugh, then I am happy. Do you know any people who laugh that are not happy? Yeah, they're laughing at you. Or they're laughing sarcastically. Right? So just because you laugh doesn't mean you're happy. So it's not necessarily true. Statement 5. If I have a summer job, then I can buy a new bicycle. So the converse, write the whole thing. Now yours might not be exactly like mine. It might be slightly different. But if you're getting across the same connotation, that's fine. I happen to write, if I can buy a new bicycle, then I have a summer job. Is that true? How else might you have bought a bicycle without a summer job? Your parents might have given you money. Might you have gotten birthday money? Christmas money? Hanukkah money? Whatever money, right? You could have gotten money someplace else other than a job. Okay, so let's flip this. Then these are the start of your symbolism. And I'll show you all the symbols for all the forms in a minute. But your conditional is an if-then statement. If your original statement is not an if-then form, I'm going to insist that you write it in if-then form first. Because when you take that conditional statement and put it into the 3 other types of statements you could, one of which just happens to be the converse, there's 2 more that we have to talk about. It makes it easier if you have it in if-then form. So we've got your hypothesis. They use this notation here, this P with an arrow, and then Q. It's read if P then Q. Or another reading of that same notation, P implies Q. And here's this diagram. You might want to put a note here that the P is your given, it's your hypothesis. This is kind of like set diagramming. Your hypothesis is smaller, it's a smaller set of the larger set. So the hypothesis is a smaller set of the larger set, which in this case would be our conclusion. So your hypothesis must belong to the larger set for the others. Well, it still wouldn't necessarily mean that all the other statements are true, but in the given conditional, the if-then statement, you must assume it's true, even though you might not agree with it. For instance, it might be something as stupid as inline skaters. If you are an inline skater, then you are a great dancer. Do those necessarily have anything to do with each other? No, but if you're given that if-then statement, you must accept it as true. The whole thing. And so that would just imply that inline skaters are a small subset of people who like to dance as a whole. So there's an example. So again, the hypothesis is P. The conclusion is Q. P hypothesis, conclusion, Q. So if P equals tears and Q equals sadness, wouldn't tears be a smaller subset of ways to show sadness? Not everybody cries when they're sad, but showing tears is one of them. And so, what are 2 ways to read P then Q with tears and sadness? If tears, then sadness. Or this one, tears implies sadness. Could you have tears of joy? So this is not necessarily a true conditional, but we're going to accept it as true for our purposes. All right, so let's look at problem 1. What are the hypothesis and conclusion of the conditional? So if an angle measures 130 degrees, then the angle is obtuse. So I want you to single underline the hypothesis and double underline the conclusion. Because that's the part that we're going to flip around for our Converse. Should they ask us to? Would you say that that's a true conditional? If an angle measures 130 degrees, then the angle is obtuse? Yeah, that's very much a true conditional. So the hypothesis is the part following what? Hypothesis follows what word? If. And the conclusion follows what word? Then. So we're not going to circle and underline because we already did it above. Now I want you to write the converse. So converse. I want you to write that out. Using if then. All right, so here's my converse. If an angle is obtuse, then the angle measures 130 degrees. So yours should sound somewhat similar. Anybody have a question as far as how you wrote yours? You want to check it. Because when you check your answers tonight, answers may vary. So you might want to tag some things and ask me, is this an acceptable conditional statement or whatever. Is this true? No, why? This is false. Because if an angle is obtuse, all you have to do is show a picture of an obtuse angle and say that that's 120 degrees. So your picture is your counterexample. So we use counterexamples that you learned last week to prove conditionals or converses false. All right, so let's look at some sets. Speaking of the fact that tears is part of the whole set of sadness. So we've got dolphins or mammals. Aren't dolphins part of the set of mammals? So your dolphins right here would represent your P, and your mammals would represent your Q, your conclusion. So if you write that as a conditional statement, it's really this down here. If an animal is, and we're going to change this into if-then form, so you can't leave it dolphins or mammals. So if an animal is a dolphin, so if an animal is a dolphin, then it is a mammal. What is the subject of the sentence? Dolphins are mammals. What's the subject of the sentence? Dolphins. So if I cut the sentence right here at the subject of the sentence, you take the subject of the sentence, that becomes your if statement. You have to add words to it to get there. And then whatever follows where your cut is, you might have to add words there and create that then statement from that point on. All right, so we're not going to answer the rest of these questions. They're kind of dumb. All right. Important but dumb. Too basic. Now this is an interesting question, and I like to keep it for a reason. Is the conditional true or false? If it is false, find a counterexample. So the question is, if a month has 28 days, then it is February. I want you to talk amongst yourselves about that and determine, is that a true conditional? Or if it's false, come up with a counterexample. So talk amongst yourselves. There's two ways to read this. Everybody talk, talk, talk. Ladies, talk to Kate over there. And gentlemen, talk to Mariah over there. You love being the subject of attention, right? Okay, so what do we think? True or false? So we have some true, we have some false. So if you're false, tell me why. What are your reasons why? What do you mean by leap year? Okay, so in leap year, he's reading this. That means that February has more than 28 days, therefore it's 29. Every month has 28 days. Do you see how you can read it that way? Some of you are thinking it meant exactly 28 days, right? Do you see how you can kind of read into that? And so I could totally see how you would say, oh, I mean, this is a fuzzy statement. I could totally see how you would say, oh, they mean just 28 days. But couldn't you also see how it's read every month has 28 days? There is no month there that doesn't have 28 days. So if you cross out and notice here that it says at least 28 days. Now that was implied in the sentence. It wasn't necessarily something that you brought out with it. So I personally would not write a sentence for you this way, at least not knowingly. I'll make it somewhat clear. But every one of these, that has, do you know how to tell what days the months have. There's a little poem that goes with it.
If it's on the big number, then it has 31 days. If it's below, then it has
That's another way, yes. I've heard that way too. 30 days has September. Oh, I haven't done this for a while. 30 days has September, June. I'm going to have to think about that. There is a poem for it. What months have 30 days? September, June. I know there's another one. April. There you go. There's the third one. So 30 days have September. Oh, I'll come up with it and give it to you another day. I always know that. That's my mother used to say that to me all the time. Yeah. What? You know the poem. Tell me.
30 days has September, April, May,
There you go. There you go. Perfect. Did you learn that from your elementary school teacher or your mama?
I actually have to preschool.
Ah. Have you learned the Knuckle Method too? No, but I've heard that. You got to count the months on your knuckles.
Yeah, so it's January, February, March, April, May, June, July.
All right, so every one of these has at least 28 days. So every one of them are a counterexample. So false, because all months have at least 28 days. So you're going to get caught on some of these. Now this is really the key part, this whole take note part. You want to know all 4 of these statements. And you want to know the notation associated with them because it tells you what to do. Now I will tell you that the cons go together. Con, con. So we've got conditional, which is your given if-then statement. We've got the converse, which is the flip-flop of the if and the then. And you can see that in the notation here. So your converse is if Q, then P. The contrapositive, you've got this tilde Q, then tilde P. So they're the same order. This tilde means a negation. It means a not. So if we were using, let's go back and look at this statement right here. If I were to not this statement, if I cannot buy a new bicycle, then I do not have a summer job. That's a negation. And so 2 out of the 4 statements are negations. One negates the original conditional, the other one negates the converse. And the contrapositive negates the converse. Whereas the inverse, right here, it negates the original conditional. So somehow you're going to have to memorize those. So if I were you, what would you do with those? I'd put them on a flashcard. And you have to know the symbols as well as the name of the statement, the type of statement it is, and then you have to be able to take one sentence and put it into all 3 other forms. So there's 4 forms altogether. You'll be given 1 form, and you have to be able to move it into the other forms. So get comfortable with it. It's going to be difficult on some things. So we're going to use this statement here, and we're going to move through and do all the different forms. So we've got angle A measures 98 degrees, so angle A is obtuse. Well, they didn't put it into if-then form, but it's not that difficult since they have a comma here, right? The subject of the sentence is angle A. That's the subject of your sentence. So this is your original P, and this is your original Q. So they've got part of it here. If angle A measures 98 degrees, then what are you going to say? Then don't say it. Avoid using pronouns and use the actual word. So then angle A is obtuse. Is that a true conditional? 98 degrees is an obtuse angle, so that's true. Okay? So then write your converse. The converse flip-flops the if and the then. So if angle A is obtuse, then what? Don't use it. Then angle A measures 98 degrees. Is that true? We already talked about this one. Is that one true? That one's false. So we're going to give a counterexample. You still have to maintain the truth of the given. When you give your counterexample, you cannot use an acute angle to prove it false. You have to use an angle that's already obtuse. So again, I'm just going to use an obtuse angle of 120 degrees. If you just draw an obtuse angle there and don't note what the degrees are, I don't know exactly what you mean. So make sure that if you're doing a drawing that you put in those degrees. All right, so let's write the inverse. The inverse is the negation of the conditional. Is that the weather alert? The inverse means we're going to negate the conditional. So let's take that original conditional and put knots in there. If angle A, what? Does not measure 98 degrees. So if angle A does not measure, so you have to adjust your grammar, 98 degrees, then not your conclusion, then angle A is not obtuse. Is that true? If angle A does not measure 98 degrees, then angle A is not obtuse. Can you come up with a counterexample that supports the given but proves the conclusion false? So can you come up with an angle that does not measure 98 degrees but is obtuse? Same angle that I drew above, right? So this is still false, and that picture that we drew above still works for this one. You can choose any obtuse angle that's not 98 degrees and put that in there as your counterexample. So we're going to put up here counter examples. All right, so then the contrapositive goes with the converse. The cons go together. So you're going to take and negate the converse statement. So before I could ever do the contrapositive, I'd have to write the converse. So you might end up having to write out, all 3 statements before you hit that contrapositive. It's possible. All right, so we're going to take that converse. If angle A is not obtuse, then angle A does not measure 98 degrees. Is this true or false? Are there any obtuse angles, or are there any non-obtuse angles that measure 98 degrees? Nope. So this one is true. And your conditional, it was also true. We didn't write that down, but your conditional is also true. Questions on that? We're going to practice that again. So flip it to the back. So I want you to finish off, they've started for you, but I want you to finish off and answer questions 20, 21, 22, and all the way through 24. So I'll give you a few minutes to answer those. you might not have enough knowledge to answer this, but does anybody know of another vegetable that might have beta carotene? Anybody aware of something that's orange, an orange vegetable that would have beta carotene? Could be a squash. Who? I don't know about orange bell peppers, quite possibly. I haven't really researched it. I do know that yams and sweet potatoes do for sure. I'm not sure if anything orange has beta carotene. I'd have to look that up. But there you go. So there could be a counterexample you could use. Avoid the use of the word it. Any pronoun, they. Go ahead and chat amongst yourselves. All right, are we ready? So So I did say avoid, but I put an example here of where you could be okay with it just because this one contains a pronoun. Do your best to avoid it because I find that if I allow you to use pronouns, we tend to use pronouns in the if part of the statements here, and you can't do that because I'll ask you what is it. So did anybody come up with a different counterexample other than what we discussed here? Be careful with your counterexamples, especially on a test, because like if you put down a orange bell pepper, I'd actually look it up to see, and if it was wrong, I'd mark it wrong. So make sure that you know proof positive, you know what I'm saying, before you put those in there. All right, so let's look at this example. It's actually a fairly decent example. It says error analysis. Your classmate rewrote the statement, you jog every Sunday. First of all, what's the subject of the sentence? You. And what are you doing? Jogging. So the jog belongs to you. So we would put a cut there because it's not an if-then form. So we want to put it in if-then form before we did anything. So then the classmate rewrote the statement, said, if you jog, then it is Sunday. What is your classmate's error? First of all, is that a true conditional? If you jog, then it is Sunday. Maybe. So here's a situation where just because you jog comes first doesn't mean that it's the true if part of a true conditional. So let's run through here. Circle the hypothesis and underline the conclusion of your classmate's conditional. So obviously, you jog would be his hypothesis, and then it is Sunday would be the conclusion. You can circle if you want to, I underline. Then 26, circle the counterexample for your classmate's conditional. So the counterexample to the conditional. You don't jog, and it is not Sunday. So if you don't jog, then that means it's not Sunday. Is that a counterexample? Are they proving the statement false? You don't jog, and it's not Sunday. Could you not jog and it not be Sunday? You could not jog on Monday or Tuesday. So that's not a true counterexample. It doesn't really prove that false. Just nodding the conditional does not prove it false. Nodding the conditional is what? What is this to that? Nodding the conditional. Go back and look at your statements on the other side of that paper. Is it the inverse? Is it the converse? Is it the contrapositive? Nodding the conditional. It's the inverse. Okay? So it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. You also jog on Saturday. That's a true counterexample. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know which one's better. This is probably the better counterexample, meaning that if you're jogging at Sunday, well, you also jog on Saturday or Monday or whatever. Then they say, write the conditional that best represents you jog every Sunday. So let me help you with it, because it's hard to come up with it. So you jog, we're cutting it there. If it is Sunday, then you jog. So let's assume that you jog every Sunday is a true statement. That's a true statement. We need to write it so that it is true. If it is Sunday, then you jog. Assuming that it's true that you jog every Sunday, that's a true condition. So sometimes you might have to flip it around. So you might run into that. All right. Last thing I want you to do. Maybe we'll do another sheet of paper. So let's take the rain today. The torrential downpouring of rain in Phoenix. Gotta love it. If it is raining in Phoenix, then school is closed. Don't you wish that were true for us? All right, I will grant it's not necessarily a true conditional, but dice aren't closed today. So if you're in dice right, that would be true. Let's assume it's true. It used to be true. If it rained, like torrential raining like today, school would be closed everywhere because buses can't get you to school. All right, so that's your conditional. Write the contrapositive. Contrapositive does what? Nope, we don't knot it. So we just flip it. We're just flipping those two parts. So your contrapositive, or I'm sorry, your converse, your converse just flips. It goes Q, then P. Remember, this is your Q. I'm sorry, this is your P. This is your Q. So we would have if school is closed, then it is raining in Phoenix. Is that necessarily true? Is school closed on any other time than when it's raining? Holidays. So this is a false conditional or converse. And your counterexample would be holidays and weekends, but we're going to assume it's weekday. All right, so let's write your inverse. What does the inverse do? Knowing your notation helps you remember what they are. Do you remember what the inverse is? The inverse is what knots the original conditional, so not P, then not Q. So take your original conditional and just knot it. If it is not raining in Phoenix, then school is not closed. If it is not raining in Phoenix, then school is not closed. Girls, are you writing? Because you should be writing instead of talking. Is that a true inverse? If it's not raining in Phoenix, then school is not closed. So when it's sunny, school is always open. What's a counterexample?
Summer vacation.
False. Summer vacation. Or holidays again, right? All right, and then the last one that we're going to write is your contrapositive. Remember what I told you about contrapositive? How do you remember which one it goes with? The cons go together, right? So if that's the con, it knots that converse. So take your converse. If school is not closed, then it is not raining in Phoenix. Is that true? If school is not closed, so school's open, then it's not raining in Phoenix. Is there any time that school is open and it's raining? How about today in Paradise Valley Unified School District? All right, your assignment's on the board. I didn't have a chance to go over your questions, so I'll still hold on to 80. I'll let you hold on to 85 until you can ask questions tomorrow.